And welcome back to Hour 2 of Beyond the Beltway. I am Paul Listic from WGN-TV. I am sitting in for Bruce DuMont this week as we do a year in review. We've talked about a lot, but there's a lot more to talk about. Let me reintroduce my distinguished panel to you. Joining us from DePaul University is Professor Ben Epstein. He is not only from there, but in his work on American politics and political communication, but media is going to come into play here in just a moment, Ben. And also joining us to my left is Philip Beverly, the director of the President's Award Program, Assistant Vice Provost at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And sitting to my right is Stephanie Hitt, former attorney and division counsel for IBM Corporation. They're big. And also an activist at convention delegate. I actually use their hotel rate. It gets me cheaper rates everywhere I go. Are you allowed to do that? I don't know. And also Professor Michael Miller, Associate Professor of Economics, Associate Dean for Quality and Compliance at DePaul University, making sure we all comply with what we're doing. Look, we've been talking about the president's policies and what's going on under him and Mueller and impeachment and the Democrats and who they offer. But Ben Epstein, you've written a book essentially on the power of the media. And I don't know how you talk about any of this without focusing in on the role of the media and really how the media has been shaped, especially by this president. This is not your father's media anymore.
No, times have definitely changed, right? The goal of politicians is similar. You want to reach people, you want to reach a lot of people, you want to have them support your views, you want to eventually get them to turn out to vote. But how you're doing that is very different today. And President Trump is very, very effective at not only using particular areas. Twitter is a focus. I think he's actually much better at Facebook, even though we don't talk about it as much. But he's most effective at directing attention where he wants it to go, or away from where he doesn't want it to go. And he's been effective at doing that since he was telling people they were fired, right? So like the idea is that he knows media, he knows social media. I don't think he's particularly he's as sophisticated playing 3D chess as some people suggest. But I do think that he's very, very effective at directing attention where he wants it to go. And everyone else is reacting to that.
And let me once again invite our viewers and the listeners to join in at 1-800-723-8289. Please join us, especially on this media conversation. I'm going to pop over to you, Professor Mike Miller, because you have thoughts about the media. Your view is they're really not seen very positively these days.
No, and my problem is essentially that journalism is a noble profession, but the journalist is supposed to tell the truth, who, what, when, where, why, and how, and so forth. You are perfectly permitted to take a position. You just aren't allowed to lie to my face and say, oh, I'm playing it right down the middle, but here I'm going to talk only about all the foibles of Donald Trump, and 95% of the news is going to be anti-Trump, but I'm playing it down the middle. I just wish that people would be much more direct and tell me, okay, I'm biased, and I'm going to let this bias affect what I tell you. What also has upset me is that these groups that have been telling us that they're playing it down the middle, such as CNN and others, they have lied to us over the past couple of years, telling us things which I thought I knew that the Mueller thing was going to come out the way it did. I couldn't believe how little curiosity their reporters had as to what was going on. And then when it finally came out that they were completely full of hooey, that they were wrong, they should have been lining up telling us we were wrong and we're going to go back and we're going to fix everything that we reported to you that was wrong. So I think the media is broken. I have no problem. Again, I have no problem with biased media.
One quick follow-up.
Freedom of speech is
CNN
wonderful.
And whatever. I'm just curious, because I don't ask you, somebody else will. Is Fox News more accurate in their reporting?
Well, if you look at the news part, like Brett Baer and so forth, they're quite good. They're down the middle. But if you look at the commentators, Tucker Carlson and people like that, of course they're going to be on the right. It's just that CNN tells us that people who are clearly on the left reporting things tell us that they are journalists or they're newscasters. They're not newscasters. Don't lie to me. I'm not stupid. Again, I have no problem with bias. I have no problem with it. Just don't tell me you're not biased when you're clearly lying to my face.
Philip Beverly, I'll pop over to you. One of the things, I watch all the channels at night. I mean, part of what I do is I want to know what everybody's hearing and what they're saying. And what I will say is, aside from what side of the aisle you're on, for the time that I spend watching MSNBC and I flip over to Fox News, you're on two different planets.
Mm-hmm. Two entirely different planets. And I get why Trump would be watching Fox News, because he's excoriated on MSNBC. To me, in a way that And there have been, don't get me wrong, I like Rachel Maddow, I like Lawrence O'Donnell. They can be entertaining. They're not going to influence me to decide something. The one word that I would take out of Mike's description of journalists, you don't have to tell me the why of something. I'll figure that out. You just need to give me the facts. I'll think
that would be
through.
sweet. Oh, I
I'll
agree.
think through
I love it.
what the facts are. It's like I don't watch the State of the Union, for example, Democrat or Republican. I don't watch that on the network. I watch it on C-SPAN because they essentially aim a camera
There you go.
down at the well.
There you go.
And they
decide
don't
for
have
yourself.
some people telling me what I just heard on the right or the left. Now, maybe I'm an anomaly in that regard, and maybe the majority of the American people need to be told what they heard isn't what they heard. I don't know. That's just not where I go.
Stephanie,
so I would
and-
want the left to sort of dial down some of the vitriol and this sort of visceral hatred of the guy. I have
me too.
I have a professional dislike of Donald Trump because he doesn't know how to govern, in my estimation. I don't care about his policies. I expect them to be on the right because he's a Republican. So I'm not anxious about that. I'm anxious that he doesn't know how to govern.
Stephanie, when I'm watching these shows at night and I'm hearing Philip, if Philip were on one of the shows, he would make the points that he would make. But generally, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, whenever they have panels, and this one will be a CNN point, it may be that the anchors no longer have an objective
Right.
appearance, but the panels always seem to have a balance of Democrats and Republicans on both sides. Does that matter?
For the most part, I think some of it is illusory because I would say, like I'll flip over to the MSNBC or the NBC, and I will tell you, whoever they put forward as, and maybe this is my bias, when I see who they've put forward as the Republican spokesperson, my first thought is, that's not a real Republican. So they tend to pick people that are willing to be made full. Well, yeah, they're not necessarily representing that position very well. So what I find is that some of these stations tend to put weaker people on the other side so that they don't look as good. And now,
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
I will say there are some people that feel that Fox may do the same thing. I'm always surprised, though, at how many strong Democrats they do put on the other side of the panel. But I want to sort of go back for a second and say and a point that Ben was making earlier. One of the things that has been, quote, the genius, maybe not the three chess moves ahead genius, of Donald Trump is he has coined something that is now standard fare, and that is fake news. Exactly. If you wanted to know, I would say the phrase of the decade is fake news, and he has cast dispersion on the media in a way that no candidate ever has.
I'm so glad you brought it up. In the brief time before we go to break, this is an opportunity for a PSA for everyone listening, which is that fake news is something he's used very effectively. And regardless of your politics, fake news is a terrible term. We should all eliminate it because it doesn't actually have a single meaning, right? It's used all over the place for all these different things.
It doesn't matter.
It's been very effective politically, right? But if we think about misinformation or disinformation, which are different and also affect how we consume information and the different vocabulary that we're getting from the right and the left, it's
All right.
it's all important.
We're going to pick up on this and talk about international issues when we come back to Beyond the Beltway. We are back on Beyond the Beltway. Paul Lisnick in for Bruce DuMont. I'm from WGN TV. Having a great conversation with our panelists this morning. By the way, you can also chime in on social media as well. We check all of those. And Ben Epstein, I will tell you that on YouTube chat, somebody made a comment talking about how reasonable you were.
I'll take that.
I
I'll take that as a
confirmed that.
compliment.
I
That
confirmed
sounds
that
great.
it was not your mother. So that was
Yes.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom.
So we
Yeah.
said, hey, Mike Miller, I want to come
Yes.
to you because I want to turn to trade. We're going to go a little more international
Sure.
in this next period. And trade issues. You know, the president tells us that with all the trade deals, with China and all the tariffs and things, we're not paying for it. China pays
that's-
for it. It doesn't. So that's not true, is it?
No, there's several ways to pay for it. One, if the price falls from the Chinese, then that subsidizes it. If the value of the currency changes, that could subsidize it. But generally speaking, and I've seen some data that show that a majority of the tax is being paid by the American people, and the pain is being felt by the farmers. So if there is one place in the economy where there's some hurt, it's actually right here in Illinois with soybean farmers and others. There's one interesting thing about it, that one of the reasons I didn't vote for Trump the first time by was because of his trade policy. I'm more of a free trade person, but his trade policy, I perceive it, is not as much economic as it is political, because it is clear that the Chinese are simply bad actors when it comes to trade. They cheat, they steal, and no one's been able to crack that nut. One way would be to take them to the WTO and sue them, but it takes forever, and who knows?
10 years.
It's just, it's ridiculous. So he decided to play hardball. I think it was unilateral tariffs are a stupid thing. We are definitely paying a price for this. But with that said, there is a chance that politically he will win and get a trade deal with China, which was better than what we had going in. And in the long run benefits will outweigh the short run costs. That's what I'm hoping will be the case.
Watchers who want to join in, you can call us at 800-723-8289. Ben, do people really understand all this trade stuff? I mean, unless it impacts their pocketbooks, and even farmers, while it does impact them, many studies show they actually still support him even though they're hurting.
Because they're getting subsidized.
No, this is going to be my follow-up to Mike. Actually, just a question for him. I mean, there was a recent study that came out from economists, I think, at the Fed that showed that in the manufacturing effect has been net negative from these. That
It has.
And that was not regarding agriculture. Agriculture,
That's
they,
correct.
they spent $18 billion in direct aid, which is over. I was surprised to see over twice as much as the auto bailouts, if we sort of have a perspective.
Right.
But
That were condemned by
and
the
so,
right.
So I'm curious whether or not I think people feel it in their individual pocketbooks. To answer your question, and so Mike suggested that this was a political strategy, and I think this could be individually political vulnerability for him, for some people that
Oh, could
supported
be.
him before. But I'm curious, Mike, what you think. Because individually for farmers, individually for
Yes.
people working in that manufacturing area, it seems to have been a net negative so far.
Yeah, well, one thing you do, even when you have free trade, is that sometimes industries will be destroyed by that, right? So what you do is you subsidize those people to help them retrain and do something else. What has happened here is the farmers have taken the biggest hit, manufacturing is second. But the farmers have been aided. There has been a whole bunch of money flowing from the government to the farmers to keep them whole, so to speak, until this is all
And
over.
politically supportive, right?
And that gives them political support. That's absolutely the case.
And
So is
Stephanie,
that-
let
You know,
me
yeah.
come to you. I know, and I
Yeah.
want you to say what you want, but I want to add to it because we talk about the trade policies with China. Let me toss in what's going on in Hong Kong these days. All the protests,
Exactly.
a lot of pressure on the president to stand behind the protesters, stand up for democracy, so to speak.
Right.
He ultimately did.
Yeah.
Took him quite a while. It looks like you're not. Yeah, I don't know how full-hearted that was, but it goes to what Mike's point, which is this isn't so much an economic game as it is a political
Well, and
game.
it is a political, and what it kind of goes back to sort of messaging. You're saying the people who are most hurt are farmers, and yet they still support him. One of the things that Donald Trump has done very effectively, he did it in this election, and he still continues to do it, is he has an incredible way of saying to the American people, I care about you. I am fighting for you. And I think we cannot underestimate how resonant that message is. And he has a knack of saying that. And when you hear it in contrast to Democrats who are saying, I'm taking this away, we're converting to this, you're going to have to lose your job, you may have to go this is why you're going to want Medicare for all, and things like that. When they hear that on the other side, even if what he's doing might hurt someone, he's saying, I'm doing it because I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for America. And that is the political component that I don't think we can underestimate how important
Yeah,
that
Philip, I
is.
wanted to come to you on that because I don't call it charisma, call it what you want, but man, he has a control over the people who believe in him.
Yeah, I think he appeals to a particular psychology that is probably from another era in our history, actually, that has no accountability, that is sort of open and I can say what I want. And the one thing that, and somebody laughed at me when I told them this, I said, 20 years from now, when historians typically will evaluate the effectiveness of a president, this president might be the one remembered for advancing race relations, for example, more than any other president just because he's so free in what he says. And his support for, I don't know, white nationalists. There's good people on the side in
That isn't what he meant.
Charlottesville.
That's not
right?
what he meant.
He actually never said that.
Had
so
to do with
again,
it
another
had to
one
do
of
with
these
its
media lies.
statutes. It had nothing.
Because it puts the issue out sort of front and center so we can talk about it. We can have the conversation.
I thought maybe
it's not
the
intentional.
the
Don't get me wrong.
highest
He's not
employment-
smart enough to
the
do that
highest- I mean,
intentionally.
the best employment rate, the increase in wages in not only the African American but Latino communities, and the economic progress. I think, in some ways, that's part of his legacy in terms of bridging. He may end up getting more support from those communities than any other Republican president.
Mike, is he look, there's a rise of conservatism going on around the world, right? England, pick your country, and you're seeing it. Is Donald Trump a symptom? Is he an impetus of that?
Boy, I think he's a little bit of both. I really do. And I thought for a second, Philip, you were going to go on down the road of deplorables. I mean, talking about people from another era that we think a certain way. I'm pleased that you did not.
No.
Because I got tired of being called a deplorable and all the other things.
Phil
And,
left us to decide what period of history he was
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about.
yeah.
But I'm thinking Wild West.
But Brexit, I think Brexit could have occurred without Trump. But the fact that it occurred and has stayed front and center, and now we have Bojo, is that what they call him, Boris Johnson, who's going to get it through? It's going to happen because Theresa May wasn't strong enough.
Look
to
at
get
his
it.
near landslide.
That's
victory.
correct. Of course, he was running against an anti-Semite who was a despicable human being.
Would you say deplorable?
He was
Or, even him, yes, individually,
Some
not a whole
individuals,
group
not
of
a
people.
whole
he
group.
was the sort of British version of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah,
Boris didn't win because Boris is great. Boris won because Jeremy Corbyn
Was
is the
so bad.
exact wrong person to run a general election against.
But you have something like Hong Kong. I was lucky enough to be there, but many years ago in the early part, 2001, and I read a lot because I taught over there on economics, and clearly they have the basic law. They have this promise from the People's Republic that for the next 50 years, which would take it to 2047, that they are going to be this unique special administrative region, and what the government's trying to do is undo that particular arrangement, and people are rising up to say you cannot do this. And the thing that strikes me is Hong Kong is what the Chinese could be if the Chinese were free. Just amazing how more powerful the Chinese economy could be if it were a free economy, but the communists refused to give up power.
Absolutely.
And the people are going to say, the people are saying, and it's mainly young people because it's their future, you are not going to take us to mainland China and put us on kangaroo courts and throw us into jail. You're not going to do it. We have the basic law, and you're going to live up to this. It's good to see that.
Before we take a break, I want to at least get one caller in because it's always good to hear them. So we've got Steve from Granson, New Hampshire coming in. He's listening at WNTK. Steve, go ahead. You got a trade comment.
Thanks for taking my call. I believe I just started listening about 15 minutes ago, so if I have the name wrong, I apologize. But I think it was Mike Miller that was talking about the politics of trade policy.
Yes.
And I agree. Well, we're on different political spectrums, but I'm
That's fine.
actually a free trader, like
Good.
you're a free trader.
All right.
And there's certainly a problem that you raised, on the political side. The economic side is really devastating, I think, because once the soybean farmers lose a market, it's not going to be easy to recapture it. But
It is hard.
the thing that I think that Trump did wrong, if you wanted to apply political pressure, which is legitimate, I agree with that, is that he should have been part of the TPP.
Oh, I would agree.
Which you would have
yes.
had all of Southeast
Yes,
Asia.
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
blew that away.
and that's the kind of thing that in 2016, I just couldn't support him because he was looking at trade through some very strange eyes. And if I could somehow have him in a room just alone and say, and I know, by the way, Larry Kudlow and some of his other economists have told him this. They
Right,
said,
but he doesn't
please,
listen.
Mr. President, you're doing harm unilaterally here. But he is playing a political game. But no,
Right, and he missed the
you're
political
spot on.
opportunity
Yep.
that would have, and the problem is that Trump unfortunately believes he knows everything.
He does. That's correct.
And obviously,
We can all agree on
he's-
that.
Yep.
Yeah, and his ego is such that it doesn't allow for real discussion.
Yeah,
that would,
ego
would
is
actually
something that's-
promote his policies.
Yeah, ego seems to be something presidents have. I think it was Barack Obama said that I'm a better speechwriter than my speechwriters. I'm a better foreign policy person than my policy people. And Trump is continuing that kind of
and this may be
hubris.
more than anybody, Ben, this may be the real gut instinct presidency.
Yeah, he one thing that he does, especially when he's in these rooms with his big rallies, he's able to take a measure of the crowd, what works, what doesn't. He tries a whole bunch of different lines, and when they hit, then and even some that he doubted, he recognizes what works and he sticks with it. Drain the swamp in 2016, he thought was a stupid idea, and then he tried it and it worked, and he realized, and then he ran with it.
He does have an agility to react, and maybe that shows some inconsistencies, which frustrate people, like in some of his policies.
All right, so we've got a half an hour to go. Let me invite you all to call it 800-723-8289. We're going to look to the future when we come back.
The future.
Welcome back to Beyond the Beltway. I'm WGN-TV's Paul Lisnick in for Bruce DuMont tonight. It's our year-end review, but this last half hour of the show is going to be a look ahead to 2020 and some of the things that we might be experiencing around this country and around the world. But before we do that, we were talking about trade and subsidies in the last break, and Mike, you kind of clarified exactly how they work, but I want to take this call because Roger's from Wisconsin. He's listening on Sirius XM, and you have a thought about the Trump farm subsidiaries. Go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking the call. The reason I'm calling is I see the farm subsidies as a little bit of a social net, safety net for the farmers. Trump can't afford to lose the farmer votes. If he does, it could sink him in 2020. However, if Trump wins in 2020, which is likely, I see Trump holding true to his stated agenda that he's going to gut the social program. So I see him using the subsidies to guarantee a buy-in vote. But come 2020, after the election, I see him abandoning the farmers because there's no value in giving them the subsidies. And you guys keep throwing out one key word, and I really, since you have to go there and you have to say it, I'm going to give you the definition. Deplorable is one that is deserving of strong condemnation. There is people on the right, and there are people in the left that are deplorable.
Not
So
half
when
of them.
you use-
Not half of them.
Not 60 million.
All
of
right,
them.
Roger. Well, I
Not 30
appreciate-
million of them.
Roger clears it up, at least with a definition. I appreciate that. And, we just use the term. But what I do when I look at things moving ahead, I do want to ask about some of the international issues as well. That's certainly part of our worldview. North Korea. Kim Jong-un has. Donald Trump had a love affair with him. He talked about that. Republicans have stood behind even Democrats have stood behind him trying to sort of make an effort there. But of course, it seems pretty clear, and even John Bolton has said in recent days, they ain't doing nothing. This is just the same bridge they keep selling over and over again to administrations. But will people care, Ben, about the North Korea issue and the fact? And by the way, there was supposed to be a Christmas surprise. The president said it might be a new vase. I don't think he got a vase.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about a gift exchange, but I think that people. I know that most American voters don't focus as much on foreign policy as they do on domestic policy. This was an issue that was important when Trump and the administration were focusing on in that direction. They haven't been as much anymore. I think there's a lot of coverage about how little there has been to show for this, but. I think for a lot of people, they're not necessarily surprised, and for other people, they haven't been paying attention to it anyway because it doesn't really feel close to home. So how much does it affect the upcoming election, for instance? I don't imagine that it does
Yeah, I'm not sure.
very
they can.
much.
Stephanie, I want to ask you, under President Obama, when he had interactions with Cuba and he had interactions with Iran, Republicans went nuts over this stuff. How do you talk to these dictators? But in his efforts with Putin and Kim Jong-un and Erdogan of
Well,
Turkey,
I
it all
think-
seems to be okay.
Well, I think especially a little bit with Cuba, but more so with Iran, the real trouble was the concessions that were made. I mean, that Iran deal. Right now, we don't see Trump making concessions. We haven't given anything. If anything, we've upped sanctions with North Korea. The frustration with working with our enemies, so to speak, is when we give away things to them, and that's where the real frustration with Obama came in.
I think that's a great
Exactly.
point. I might push back a little bit that giving something away isn't just economic, right? What the leaders of North Korea wanted more than anything else was to be legitimized on the world stage,
Right.
and
to
so
be seen with, yes.
and to be seen on that stage and to have those face-to-face meetings. And so what they were giving up is that, right? Is
But
that authority and that
I
that
think, though, what's
that
interesting
exposure.
on that is that that only goes so far in North Korea. That those pictures, those photo ops, nobody else in the world would take seriously, Kim Jong-un, even if he's standing next to Donald Trump. In fact, you would argue that a lot of people don't take Donald Trump seriously, so it wouldn't necessarily legitimize him. I think what's really frustrating is, we felt like we gave up a lot of things, even with Cuba. We sort of are
yeah.
now
Got
willing to
nothing
look
for it.
away, and we got nothing for it. And Iran, and that we can talk about whether that could be a major achievement, is the unraveling of that nuclear agreement with Iran. But giving pallets of cash and allowing Iranians to continue for a foreseeable future of developing non-weapons grade. Nobody bought that one. They felt like we gave them
Mike,
the store.
You want to respond to Iran?
No,
so
that's-
let me bring you to the Middle East.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the things the president has said, we have thousands of years, but we've been waiting for peace in the Middle East. Jared Kushner is eventually going to make this happen, from what I understand. But let me ask you, with the steps the United States has taken, Jerusalem being recognized, the Gaza, the Golan Heights.
Golan Heights.
Yeah.
Well,
all that's going to be okay. My question is, does the United States have the credibility anymore to broker peace in the Middle East?
Oh wow! I'm not sure anybody does. I'm neither Jewish nor Arab nor Israeli, but I've chosen a side, and only one side wants peace. The other side wants to destroy the other side. The Palestinians want to destroy the state of Israel, and until that is taken care of, I don't know that there's a solution to this at all. Jerusalem was the right decision. I mean, it is the headquarters of. And a country has the right to choose where its capital city is. So and you look at, if I could just 1 second back on Kim Jong-un, I hope that this would never occur. But if someday it gets to the point where he becomes so belligerent we have to go to war, we can at least say we bent over backwards to talk to you, to try to bring you into the world of nations, and you absolutely kicked sand in our face, and now we're going to have to destroy you.
Is this Neville Chamberlain, 1938? We appeased you. Hold on.
No, we didn't
this is
appease
this
them.
is
We
this
talked
is
to them. What are
this
you
is a
talking
guy
about?
We haven't
that
given him anything.
this is a guy
I didn't say anything
that
about
we're
peace
getting
in our
played
time.
by. He's got one audience. Kim Jong-un has one audience. It doesn't matter to the rest
The military
of the
to
world.
keep him from being overthrown.
He's got one audience. And so him being on the public stage for that one audience is enough.
But
That we are
someday we may-
inconsistent in our policy with a country that has nuclear weapons and a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons is disturbing to me. And then our inconsistency in the Middle East, more generally abandoning the Kurds and ceding parts of Syria to Turkey and their security zone or whatever, and now making the Iranians more powerful in that part of the world, that was on us. And that was a stupid move by this president.
Well, but then
We'll see.
we can fast forward to
see.
Iran, and then that might be the place to watch. We are now seeing, and maybe it's the effect of sanctions and
Yeah,
walking
their
back from the
economy
deal.
is collapsing.
Their economy is collapsing, and there is real unrest.
I got a question for
Real
you, Mike.
unrest
You're the
there.
economist. In the political science literature that I've read over the years, economic sanctions have never brought down a government.
no, they have. not that I know of either. I've not seen it.
Because authoritarian regimes who are the only object of said sanctions are going to be able to control the economy and skim off the top whatever they need to stay in power, so that the economy is collapsing. And my partner's
Venezuela.
parents call Iran and can't talk on the phone because the phones are. But it's an authoritarian regime,
Look at
so we know
Venezuela.
how bad that is.
But
But the regime is still in power.
I know. And if you go back and
They control the military as well, and that's key. I mean, Venezuela is a perfect example of that.
Let's bring in. We have a caller, Mark from Carmel, California, who has a positive view from what I'm reading about the president's being able to control the nations of the world. Hi, Mark.
Hey, good evening, Bruce, and thanks for the end of the year show. Or I'm sorry, I called you Bruce.
It's okay. Bruce
listen,
probably appreciates it.
Well, no, your voice actually kind of sounds similar to his in cadence and what have you.
Hasn't
Hey,
cracked.
so listen, my idea about President Trump, and I will call him President Trump forever, and I think he's going to go down in history 20 years from now as perhaps the greatest president we've had since Reagan. But he's P.T. Barnum-esque. Okay, this guy comes around once a decade and once a century, P.T. Barnum, and he really is he busted his chops with the WWF, he learned the media, he learned how to do business, he met more foreign world leaders during his business tenure than all of our presidents combined. This guy is a player, and he's played the media masterfully. He's played the foreign leaders masterfully, and some of the things he's done we all don't agree with, but I'm thinking we're looking at the short term. I'm looking to see what he does in the next 4 years after re-election, because frankly, what he's done under 3 years of extreme duress has been frankly amazing.
All right, Mark, I want to thanks for the comment. Ben, let me come to you, because if he's reelected for 4 more years and the Supreme Court, going back to what we talked about in the first hour, stands behind him in so many things he wants. This is a president who essentially has granted to the executive branch power like the country has never seen, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I mean the two Supreme Court justices that have been added during his term, right? Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have shown pretty consistent support for increased executive power and authority, and so that may continue if he's reelected. There are likely to be more Supreme Court vacancies in the next 4 years. So
Literally every time Ruth Bader Ginsburg sneezes, the Democratic Party takes a
Yes.
deep breath and says, "Please be okay."
And Mitch McConnell will hold hearings if it happens within a year. He will.
Absolutely, he will.
Oh, absolutely,
It should be
because
so much fun.
He said he would. All right, when we
because
come
there's
he's the one who's the
two
player
sets of
right there.
rules.
Exactly.
When we come back, it's our final segment. These 4 guests will help me look ahead to what next year, 2020, looks like. We hope you'll join us. This is Beyond the Beltway. Stick with us. Welcome back for our final segment of Beyond the Beltway. Paul Lisnick from WGN-TV here in Chicago, in for Bruce DuMont with a great panel. I want to use these last few moments to look ahead as to what 2020 might hold for us. But there is something we didn't really talk about, climate change. So I want to bring this up because I was curious, Stephanie, your response when Time named Greta Thunberg the person of the year, and her world's about climate change. I don't know that how much people out in Democrats are going to care about climate change in this new election. But I was curious what your reaction was when the president told her to chill out and go see a movie with friends.
Oh, well, I feel like it's beneath the president. He should not be talking about it. She's a young 16-year-old, whatever. He was being, flip. I don't think that's appropriate. But when you look at Time Magazine making someone like this the person of the year, I think it really shows a disconnect between what Time Magazine thinks about the world and what most Americans think about the world. And I
Is
think
that a comment about climate change?
Right. And I think that when you look at, the kitchen table issues, the things that people care about, climate change is not one of them. So to have that represent the issue of the year, so to speak, was very much a disconnect.
So, and Ben, I want to come to you on that because essentially, as the Democrats, we go through the primary, the Democrats will lean towards progressive. That's what happens. As Republicans lean towards conservatives, then you have the general, right? But if Democrats focus in on climate change and the Green New Deal and those kind of things, there's a lot of people, if a Republican is observing this, they're going, yeah, Democrats just keep doing it because we're going to win 48 states.
Yep.
I disagree. I think that whether it's a Democratic strategy or a Republican strategy, it's a forward-thinking strategy, and I think that Trump, if we obviously coming back to him, but he's done a very good job of bringing back this, Make America Great Again, this idea of the past. The idea of talking about climate change and what is happening now is the most important issue to my students across the board, regardless of their ideology. Young people, they're looking forward. And if you're going to talk about, Stephanie mentioned that it's maybe not the leading issue. It is the leading issue around the world, and the United States has been lagging on that. So that might actually be an indicator of what Time Magazine sees as the United States eventually coming around to, and young people, regardless of partisanship, supporting this more and more, and older people as well.
Professors here. I've got to go to the teachers here. Mike, do young people vote?
Not in very big numbers that I know of.
Biggest jump in.
It depends. It depends on the election. Is there a longitudinal sort of trend that shows that they tend to turn out at a particular level that's higher than the average? No. But there's spikes in elections, and that's the thing.
And the biggest spike in young voting happened in this last midterm, and so young people are paying attention.
But Greta, what really she unfortunately wrote an editorial with several other people, and she showed her true colors. What she cares about is colonization, racial politics. This is not about the climate. This is about pulling down the Western economy. This is creating it is to create a communal system where we're a one world government, where we are all going to be together and we're all going to have planned economies. It is going to destroy the exact growth that energy has allowed us to have.
It's
become
taking
religious.
away individual and personal freedom. I mean, that's one thing that sets our country apart from any other in the world.
So
and
are you
that is
denying the science?
I'm not going to talk about the science right now because what we're going to talk about.
Okay,
No,
I'm just asking the question.
I'm not a
Are you
scientist.
denying the science?
I am not a scientist, and to be
Do you
honest,
expect-
I am not convinced that the science is there.
But
However, I want to make the one point, and that is, Ben made the point that this is an issue the world cares about. No, it is not. It is an issue that wealthy European nations with luxury care about.
That's right.
India, Asia, the largest countries in the world do not care about this. They may also be our largest polluters. However, and you know what? We don't lag behind. We lead the world.
Which
in
is why
terms
we
of
got
our-
out of the Paris
our
Accord.
The only
conservatism,
country-
our environmentalism, and so on. When you look at the amount of manufacturing and stuff that we do, and the point is, the world is about people surviving. And
I
you
agree.
are not going to
using
survive
the
if
heater
you can't find a
tent.
way to make food or to build a life for yourself or to create goods that you can sell. And if someone tells you you can't do that because somehow in some way that's going to pollute the world, that's not going to work. When you look at the people in Asia and India, they are looking to survive, they are looking to live, they want better lives from themselves. Guess what? Fossil fuels do it.
So
and you can't take that away.
With a couple of minutes left, I do want to talk about sustainability when it comes to Beyond the Beltway, if I can. How's that for a transition?
Well done.
Yes. I want to remind you that Bruce has a GoFundMe campaign going on. It covers the cost of actually keeping this satellite delivery on the air. That's what's so important in 2020. Your help is really needed. If you go to the GoFundMe page, those of you watching this online, for example, can see the page there. Look up Beyond the Beltway. You can make your donation. Bruce appreciates every donation that comes in. We want to keep things moving for this program, keep it on the air. I can tell you that we're looking to bring in, Bruce is looking to bring in another $3,000 or so. It's expensive to have satellite time go, so your help is appreciated, and thank you. And that was my transition. But with the time we have left, I do want to walk around the table and Ben and basically say the one thing in 2020 that you think Republicans or Democrats should be concerned about or people should be concerned about. What is your eye on in 2020?
Oh man, that's such a huge question.
And 30 seconds to answer it.
Oh my gosh. I think that they should be paying attention to the quality of the information that they receive, trying to find out what's actually going on, having a couple trustworthy places for good information, and then being able to get involved
All right.
in the issues they care about.
Philip.
I'm concerned about Russian interference in our elections. They're not going to stop. And I think Putin has succeeded beyond his wildest imaginings in helping foster division in this country through the interference that started before 2016, but really highlighted this.
Stephanie.
I think we should pay attention to loving and being kind to our neighbors. We are seeing a rash rise of horrific crimes against people based on their religion, their beliefs, whatever. And to steal a line from Ellen DeGeneres, she had it right, that at the end of the day, we're people. We need to be kind to each other.
Mike.
If I could only wish for one thing, and that media does some soul searching and goes back to journalism as opposed to political boosterism.
All right,
That'd
that's
be
our
great.
look back at 2019, our look ahead at 2020. I want to give my thanks, first of all, to Bruce for letting me sit in this chair tonight. It was a great show to be able to do that with good friends and panelists joining me. My thanks as well to Andrew Merschel, who is the producer of tonight's show, and Fritz Goldman, who is the director of tonight's show. A lot of people behind the scenes you don't get to see that make this happen. I'm Paul Lisnick. Thanks for watching Beyond the Beltway. Happy New Year, everybody.
Do you worry about how much